30 times. Ten times more. Two times more. Letting go and stop.
And so that's why, when you come up to someone, an example would be like that electrostatic shock. When when you brush past someone and you get that. And on a more psychological level, you can experience that field is like maybe you're in a really great mood, and then you get into a conversation with some friends and they're so totally depressed, and you come away from there thinking, I feel awful, I need to go and have a shower. You feel so... So their field has interacted with yours and impacted you, because that field is coming from your mind, which then uses the brain and converts what you're experiencing into these thoughts, and then these thoughts are generating, there's this whole relationship, the iron filings concept, and this is back and forth, and this literally is photons. Einstein showed us that we're literally generating from our thoughts as we talk from our thoughts, that you can't talk without thoughts. You build thoughts, and then your actions and behaviors and communication come from the thoughts. So this would generate healthy. It's a nice healthy green tree, and here's a toxic one. So this would be a toxic, the depression or whatever, being negative or whatever. That would generate toxic photons, and these are the ones that would make you, you feel it. You feel that negativity. This is a sense of you're around a happy person, and you just feel like amazing, And so it's very real. This is not some ethereal thing. We're talking about the non-physical sciences of quantum physics and things like that, but it's real, and there's an impact and an effect, and we can control it. That's the interesting thing.
What is the definition of quantum physics? What is that in relation to the mind?
So quantum physics is considered to be one of the most fundamental and accurate sciences, and at its most simple level, because it's really had bad press, but it's been around for very long, and it basically just deals with the unseen, when you talk about particles and waves and the subatomic level. So what we can see now looking at each other would be what we would consider the classical physics realm, that you can see and touch and feel and hear. So it's very...
you can operate on it. You can...
Yes. Yeah, so it's the physical. But if you actually, and we see from studying of the atom that things get smaller and smaller, and then you've got the subatomic level, then you're entering the quantum world. So once we go into the subatomic level, we actually see that the atom is not really an atom. Particles change according to their waves, and then they're particles only when you actually look at them. So it's considered the observer effect, and it's really interesting because it means that we have these waves of energy, and as we make a choice, we create reality, which we do. So as you think, feel, and choose, you change your brain, because every time you choose, think, feel, and choose, those three things always go together. Always thinking means you're always feeling. Thinking and feeling means you're always choosing, and it's happening at like 400 billion actions per second constantly.
"30 times. 10 times more. Two times more. Letting go and stop.
So we're processing this world around us through this think, feel, choose, and then we build thoughts. So there's this structural consequence. So thought is actually a physical response of the think, feel, choose. And quantum physics kind of is helping us understand that. But quantum physics is real, is easier to understand with classical physics. So classical physical, quantum, the sort of non-physical world to work together. Does that make sense?
It does. When we feel something, when something happens, there's an event in our life. Someone touches us. Do we feel it first? Do we think that we're feeling something? And how is that connection to the mind, body work?
Very good question. So it's think, feel, choose. So like as we
So I touch you on the shoulder. You think it first, or you feel it first?
It's going to happen pretty much simultaneously. So there's going to be because there's the sensation, and it immediately will stimulate think and then feel and then choose. So the feeling, the think, feel, choose work together to make sense of the physical impact and what it means, and if it's threatening or not threatening, and all kinds of decisions are made in your mind, and it happens super fast. So it's think, feel, choose in cycles, and it's really, really fast. You know, we talk about 400 billion actions per second, but it's actually 10 to the 27 and faster, which is an inconceivable speed. So what I've done with my work is to try and understand this, you know, what is a thought and what is memory and what is mind and what is brain and how do they interact and how do they influence and do we have any sense of agency over this process and what does it look like?
Yeah, can you explain it all?
Absolutely, I can certainly try. So I spent 38 years studying this, and I started out in the world of working in more clinical. I practiced clinically for 25 years, and I initially started my research in the 80s, and funny enough, in the 80s, the brain, we were taught that the brain couldn't change. So all my lectures were around the brain is fixed.
It's fixed. Fixed mind, fixed brain, fixed mindset.
Yeah, so it kind of that's it. You just got to learn how to kind of, you know, work around it, and so that's just and compensate, more of a compensation kind of philosophy. So I remember thinking in one of my neuroscience lectures that this does not work for me because we're changing and growing as humans. So I said, no, I'm going to start researching this, and I was told by my professors that's a ridiculous question, and I actually did a TED talk on this, the ridiculous question of neuroplasticity.
Thirty times. Ten times more. 2 times more. Letting go and stop.
So in the 80s, I said, okay, well, give me the worst situation. What's the worst situation? They said, okay, it's traumatic brain injury. Once someone's had a traumatic brain injury, and I mean, your dad went through one, that's it. Pretty much that's, written off. And we were trained, as I said, to compensate. So I said, okay, well, there's hardly any research in the 80s on brain injury and on how to treat it. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start there. And so I worked with people that had been in comas for like longer than 2 weeks. And at that stage, if you were in a coma for longer than 8 hours, the brain damage was considered irreversible. Now, in this day and age, we know that's not the case. But in the 80s, that was the going philosophy. So I was completely swimming upstream when it came to this concept. Anyway, I showed with my subjects that with using your mind, and not in any weird way, just a very systematic, deliberate, intentional mind management in different ways and different brain building and dealing with emotions and just different ways, same sort of process, that you can actually change this. And so some of my very first case study was a girl who was 16 at the time of the accident, and she had lost a whole year of school, written off as a vegetable. I mean, that's what the doctors used to say in those days, which is a terrible thing to say to someone. Anyway, long story short, after 8 months, not only did she manage to, she came around. I started working with her when she was conscious and functioning sort of at a second grade level, and she wanted to. Her goal of greatness was to get back to finish 12th grade, and with her peer group. Now that was an impossible task. All the doctors said, don't even go down that road. Not even worth it. So I said, well, I was a new scientist then, very young, totally into this. Said, well, go with me. Let's do this. And within 8 months, she caught up to a 12th grade level, finished school with her peers, and went on to get a university degree. And one of the coolest things was that she was actually a really average student and not even good at math. After the accident, using her mind to change her brain, she became like a math genius. This was like, and I can tell you story after story, and that really motivated me to work across the board with, now I really have to understand what's going on. And I happened to be living in South Africa where I grew up at the time. I was born in Zimbabwe and grew up in South Africa. And in the apartheid era, I mean, this is like, it really ages me, doesn't it? Go back into those, I worked through the apartheid era, the transition and the post-apartheid era. So I was seeing all the socioeconomic trauma, the racism trauma, and I worked in that 3 days a week in those environments with terrible poverty and whatever. And I worked in war-torn Rwanda, and I worked with the wealthiest of the wealthy, heads of CEOs of corporations, schools, everywhere that my laboratory was the world, to try and understand humans and mind and get away from this scientific concept that consciousness is the hard question and no one is really doing anything. We're just talking about it as being as this elusive philosophical thing that we will push aside, and one day promissory science will do it one day. And I thought, no, I can't do this, because I am mind, you are mind.